Welcome to another Unwinding with Fiber and Fabric and Tour de Fleece 2023. I've rearranged a little because I want to use the Kromsky Symphony today. And because I've rearranged, my cats have spent most of the last setup time investigating everything. I am hoping I have them distracted somewhere in the other part of the house so that we might be able to do this video without chaos. I will knock on some wood and we will see what we can do. So I have a second camera set up over here this time. I will insert some footage of my hands because this wheel, while you'll be able to see this hand, you won't be able to see this hand very much. I think you'll still get an idea of how I'm going to be doing the long draw with this fiber. I've switched to my green fiber that I prepared to go along with the green jerseys of the Tour de France, and I decided I wanted to use this wheel mainly because it is a full 4 ounces that I will be spinning, and well, I haven't used this wheel on camera yet. I did start the bobbin last night. I wanted to make sure I didn't have a really squeaky bobbin, and I also wanted to kind of get a feel for how I was going to spin this. Normally when I spin 100% merino, it gets very, very thin, but I'm trying for a thick, woven, floofy fiber this time. So we will see if I can accomplish that over the time that it takes me to spin this fiber. So let's go ahead and pull out the topic for today. And today's topic is Roving, Top, Batts, Rolag, and Puni. So, some basic fiber prep for spinning, and why we have the different things and what they mean. So, let's go ahead and put my note cards. Let's see. Put my note cards over here. And I think I'll go ahead and take this section of nests out of the bag and remove the bag so that I'm not crinkling it. Oh, and plus that looks really pretty behind the wheel. So, all right, let's get going with the spinning. I have prepared this. This was a hank, a 4-ounce hank of merino roving that I dyed back in December with the excess dye from my December spin. And what I did with it is I took that braid of yarn and I split it. I've already shown a little bit of that in one of my earlier videos, but if you were to go back into my playlists and find actually my Tour de Fleece 2020, especially I think maybe the one that we had in the second part of it when they had the delayed race, but you'll find I have a bunch of footage, some videos that were showing, yes, in the second part, showing me splitting the, it's still early, splitting the braid of fiber into these stripped sections. It makes it very much like a pencil roving. And I don't have to do a lot of drafting with this because I am trying to spin it thick and woolly. Now, when I was doing this back in 2020, I was going through so many, trying to get ready for my Countdown to Christmas project. I was going through so many braids of fiber that I did end up over twisting some of the yarn, so it was a little denser than it needed to be. My goal this time is to keep fluffiness in it. So I've gone with, and I know you can't see this on the camera, but no, even if I tilt this back, I've gone with a larger ratio. So I think with, not to confuse anybody, because I know that the whole math thing, but I've gone with a larger whirl so that I'm getting less twist, but I'm still pulling, the take up is still pretty hard, so I'm getting a lot less twist going into my single than I believe I had when I did this back in 2020. So my goal is to have, when I'm done, a balanced yarn, but with the minimal amount of twist for it to be evenly balanced spun. So it'll be woolly and fluffy. That's my goal. So on the topic for today, we're talking about, let's start with roving versus top. They oftentimes are interchangeable. Hold on. There. I ended up with fiber on my tongue. Maybe that's a good indication that I'm spinning this woolen, is that the fibers are going everywhere. But roving and top, while oftentimes get used interchangeable, especially the roving. Roving has a tendency, if we see a braid of fiber, we tend to call it roving. But there is a technical difference between roving and top. Roving, traditionally, is a fiber that has been carded, not intending to keep all of the fibers going in the same direction. It is meant to be rather like the hand cards where we turn it into a Rolag. Oh yeah, I was going to bring some of those to show. I'll show some pictures as I'm speaking. I'll take some time and show the Rolags in case you really are new to this and you haven't seen a Rolag. I've actually I have been making some Rolags for another project, simply because, you know, there's a lot. My husband and I are kind of, my husband has some time off right now, and so we've been watching a lot more TV, and I've been doing fewer projects other than spinning. So I've been carding some fiber into true Rolags, not faux Rolags. And we'll get to that in just a minute. But when you use hand cards and you card the fiber, while the carding process does align the fibers to an extent, when we roll the fibers off the hand cards, we're now making it so when we spin it, the fibers aren't necessarily going to be aligned anymore. And that is a Rolag, and it's also the basis of a roving. Top, on the other hand, is traditionally something that is created by combing the fibers and then using something that's called a diz. Think of basically any round disc with a hole in it. The whole diameter of the hole determines how thick of the fiber. So you pull some of the fiber through the hole, and you keep pulling, and you get something that can look like this, but it's all aligned. All of the fibers are aligned. And I do know there are people who will do this technique off of a drum carder, and I would imagine you could do it off of your hand carders, and you would get a little bit more of the aligned fiber, more of a top preparation. Even using a carder, you would get more of a top preparation because more of your fibers would remain aligned. So the main difference between the technical terms of top and roving is combed fibers try to keep all of the fibers aligned, whereas carded fibers don't aim for that. and you get a fluffier product, usually, depending on how you're spinning it, from a roving or a Rolag from carded fibers than you do combed fibers. Combing the fibers is really wonderful to get a worsted, a slick, a smoother finished yarn. That is the goal. So when we move past roving and top, whether it is commercial or trying to do it by hand, and most of what we're purchasing today is commercial, although I know there's a lot of indie stores out there that will sell you stuff that is in coils, stuff that has been turned into what is called either a Puni or a faux log. Now let's talk about those, because that's the other two terms that have a tendency to get overlapped and maybe misused, depending on how technical you're wanting to be. Anyone who follows me for very long knows I am not a technical person, but I do understand and appreciate the history and the culture that go behind some of these things and some of the words. And so it's good to know what we're talking about, even if we do sometimes overlap or misuse a word. So Puni, P-U-N-I, plural being P-U-N-I-S, is fiber, usually cotton, that is rolled off of a blending board or hand carders, probably hand carders, by using a dowel and rolling the fiber onto the dowel and then pulling the dowel out of it. So you have a tightly woven little worm of fiber. And with blending boards, it's really quite lovely. You get some long, beautifully, sometimes beautifully beautifully blended fibers. Oh, I have to remember that camera's trying to catch this. So I'm not really sure where, so I may not have the greatest side footage, but as you can see, I'm just very lightly drafting and letting it pull into the machine. This is a fabulous way to practice the long draw. It really is. It's a fabulous way just to practice keeping a light tension on the fiber and letting it go through your fingers. You doing the prep this way, stripping down a braid of roving. My cats have come and joined me again. One of them has a giant Easter egg that she's playing with next to me. I don't know how much of it ever ends up on the microphone picking it up, but she is here and she is now tasting the tripods, and hopefully we'll have no issues. She'll just come and then she'll go. So as I was saying, Puni is the term that goes to the using the spinning of the cotton, rolling it tightly around a dowel, pulling the dowel out, and having a little worm of fiber that you would then spin. Because we use the blending boards and we're blending all of these lovely mixtures of fibers and we're rolling them off using dowels, we tend to sometimes call them Puni. But traditional Puni tend to be cotton, not our wool, not our batt. So when we roll our fiber off of our hand cards or off of our blending board using a dowel system, and I know I have videos that show that, so if you go look for one of my blending boards, I do have playlists where I try to categorize my videos. So if you look for the ones that are about spinning and spinning fibers, you'll find one where I'm showing you how I use my blending board. So when we roll off of our hand carders or our blending board, I imagine we could use a drum carder too, to some extent. When we do that, what we're really actually creating is a faux log. It's not a traditional Rolag, and it's not really a traditional Puni either. So it's kind of like how we're using roving as a general term for everything that is a hank of fiber that we're buying. Faux log is a good term for all of the different rolled up worms of fiber that we're creating. It's just a good term to use. And because we're an international community, because we're a community that is based on many different cultures, and because so much of what we're talking about today, and so many of us spinning today, are new to the craft. It is not a craft that has been passed down as often with us, the newer spinner, the new generation of spinners. It is not as often as something that's been passed down from generation to generation. And because of that, I think it is important for us to try to have neutral terms when it comes to us using and doing things that are really not traditional. Nothing wrong with them. In fact, just the opposite. We're using the new man-produced, machine-produced, I should say, materials. And so we are using things that weren't available to spinners 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago. So it is I think it is actually, it's useful not in the sense of just culturally more sensitive. I think it is useful because if everybody keeps calling everything something different, our communication with each other, especially on these YouTube channels, is limited. Whereas if we use a more neutral term, we're using a language that we can all understand. It's more easily translated, especially when the neutral term is followed up with a photo of some sort. And that's one of the things that does, I'm a historian, so of course, my side camera just died. I guess that battery didn't want to take a full charge, so hopefully I have some side footage for you. If not, oh well. So if I don't, I will be spinning more of this green later, and I'll get some footage of that. Technical. So as I was saying, I'm a historian. I love learning the history. I love learning the terminology. My daughter is a young anthropologist. She has always been drawn to anthropology and sociology and looking at the cultures of peoples. And so between her influence on me and my history background, and my, even earlier than that, my international relations background, for me, I'm very curious. I'm very interested in knowing the history of what something is, the history of where it came from, and the history of the people that that lived in times and did these activities, did these skills and crafts, and they did them because it's part of survival. It's part of clothing ourselves. It's part of everyday life. It's not a hobby. Even to the extent of when it became something that you bartered and you traded and you sold. I have a grandmother that paid for her passage on a ship to the United States back in the 1800s, bartered or paid for her trip by doing what they called fancy work, which fancy work usually is hand embroidery, can also be lace making, whether it be crocheted lace or bobbin lace. That can sometimes in some areas be considered fancy work. And she did fancy work, and that's how she paid for her passage. That's how she paid to become an immigrant to a new country. So I'm always fascinated, and I'm intrigued and interested in the history and in the correct terminology. However, I was not taught to spin by anyone related to me. I was not taught to spin in my youth. This is not something that has been historically passed or anthropologically passed down from generation to generation in my family. I'm a new generation spinner, and I am a new generation spinner spinning on, in some cases, wheels that are made to look like antique wheels, but I only have one antique wheel, and I don't do that one very often. I am replicating. I am inspired by history. And so when I talk to an audience, when I share the love of spinning, I like to use words that are neutral, that are culturally neutral, that are easily translatable language to language. That's the other thing. It's about communication. I think we sometimes lose sight of the fact that we're supposed to be talking to each other, communicating, sharing. And we can't do that if we are entrenched in the way we were taught to say it by our teacher umpteen years ago. Because I read a passage. In fact, hold on. This is actually something I do want to share. Let's see. I think it is, let's see, not that one. Maybe this. Yes, this one. Okay. Let me pull out one of my books. I have a quote. Let me read this quote to you, because I think this is very appropriate, especially since I am spinning woolen today. Okay. This is Judith Mackenzie in her Intentional Spinner book. And this is a book that is available through Kindle at this time. You can get some used copies, as I was able to track down without paying an arm and a leg. Just a little note. I'm going to show you up close. Now, normally when you see her name, you're just going to see Judith Mackenzie. But if you look up Judith Mackenzie McEwen, I was able to find a used copy that was not going to break my bank. And now there's only going to be a couple of those out there, and people are going to get them. So good luck with that. But it is available on Kindle. So it is available for a much more cost-inclusive price. All right, here's the quote. When I learned to spin, my teacher spun beautifully and had strong opinions about spinning that served her well. She had earned the right to those opinions. For her, there were two types of spinning. Worsted and wrong. Imagine my surprise when years later, and far from our village, I tried to spin cotton and found nothing in my spinning experience helped. Cashmere wasn't easy either, and my spun Angora was like wire. I experimented and struggled for several months until I found a method that worked and made spinning those short, crimpy fibers a joy and a pleasure. When I finally met other spinners, I discovered the technique I had reinvented was woolen spinning. And she goes on to say, I have to laugh. I just think that is so great. She goes on to say, there is no right or wrong way to spin, but like everything else, spinning is governed by cause and effect. If you do this, that will happen. When you understand the forces at work in your yarn, you can choose and even modify any of the basic spinning methods to get exactly the yarn you want from the fibers you choose. I love that quote. That is one of the more delightful things I have discovered, if not the most delightful thing I have discovered in this preparation for Tour de Fleece, because it really helps us understand. It even helps us understand one of the heralded spinners of our time, Judith Mackenzie, she started out somewhere and she was told this is the right way and everything else is wrong. And there are a lot of instructors who that is exactly the kind of, the truth is, through my life, I've run into people like that. This is the right way and everything else is wrong. It's probably why I gravitate so much to in my philosophy, and this goes with my quilting and sewing, the only wrong way of doing something is something that is not structurally stable, that is not going to do and hold up to the task. Oh, my hair's getting in the way here. Not going to hold up to the task we're going to ask it to do. When it is not structurally stable, when there is a problem with it that is going to cause a failure, a failure in the use, then we need to correct it. I always use this as an example. When you're hand quilting, if your stitches are even, that is the goal. But if your stitches are even and you can get a pinky fingernail underneath it, then it's going to get caught, it's going to get torn, it's not going to hold up. It won't do the task. So we fix it and we improve it and we work on it and we practice. So that is my philosophy. That is the philosophy that I take into my spinning. There is not necessarily a wrong way if what you're creating structurally, functionally works for the goal. And that goes, if you're making something that's art and it works as art, then it's art, then it's functional, then it's structural for the task. So I think I have gone over, I've talked about roving, I've talked comb top, I've talked about Rolags. Oh, the final one, the one that if you have drum carded your fiber and you pull all that fiber off, it's a bat. So there you have it, the last one. And what I normally do with a bat is I'll strip off sections and I will spin it as big, fat, chunky carded fiber. Sometimes I'll just hold the bat in my lap and spin, but most of the time I'll just strip off pieces. You can strip off pieces and roll them into a Rolag. The message, I guess, is you can do whatever works for you. You can do what feels right for you. It's your fiber. It's your journey. So that is my message for today. I hope that you're enjoying Tour de Fleece. I hope that you're enjoying these videos and finding them useful. If you do, please feel free to hit that like button. You can find me on Ravelry, Instagram, and Facebook as Pioneer Lady. On Instagram and Facebook, it's Pioneer Lady at Pithy Ponderings. Pithy Ponderings is my blog that I go to when I have an interesting thought that I want to share. All right, that's my spiel. So again, I hope that you have taken time to unwind with some fiber and fabric, that you are enjoying your Tour de Fleece, that you're enjoying your day, and that you have found joy in what you're doing. Okay. I am now going to rest because rest is also important. We will see you again tomorrow. Until then, bye.